Hello, everyone. Welcome, and I'm very happy that I can welcome you to the very first Geneva Impacts talk after the summer break with the title that you all read, The Green Swans, Taking Off for a New Economy. I hope that you all could recharge your batteries at some point during the summer, and I'm very delighted to reconnect with you today alongside with my colleagues. For the newcomers among you, I'm Marianne Schörling, and I have the honor to be moderating our session today. At the Geneva Macro Labs, I'm head of stakeholder engagement, building up a community of thought leaders in Geneva and beyond. My co-moderator, as you can see on the slide, will be Renate Günther, VP at the Geneva Macro Labs, who will guide us through the questions from the audience, and she will keep an eye on the chat where we invite you to share your comments and questions for the speakers with us. Now, being based in Geneva, we established our Think and Do tank over the last years to showcase within our ecosystem how to combine the thinking and doing towards the United Nations Sustainable Goals. We look at the new technologies in a way to see how we can support a sustainable future. And at the core of our activities are conferences, webinars, a design thinking program, and trainings where we enable better recommendations and best practices to address global challenges. And finally, I would like to highlight our signature initiative called Geneva Impacts, which we like to refer to as a fast track of actionable projects towards sustainable development. And we're just about to enter the implementation phase of one of our first projects. It's about carbon sequestration by whales and blue carbon tokens. I invite you to take a look at our website, and we'll share the link shortly in the chat. Now, today we have two extraordinary speakers with us. They're representing two different regions, Europe and Amazonia, and they also represent different approaches in the field of sustainability, but still they are very much aligned when it comes to promoting the idea that businesses should balance economic pursuits with social and environmental outcomes. Please welcome with me Professor Dr. John Elkington from Volans and Mayra Castro from Invest Amazônia. Together, we will focus on the question what we can learn from green swans and Amazonia for responding for today's challenges. Both Brazil and Amazonia and the green swans are indicators of a paradigm shift on how to address sustainability challenges. And this is also, by the way, something that we're working on within our Geneva Impacts Initiative. You can see the agenda on the slide, on the screen. We will first talk about challenges driven by market mechanisms and the question what is needed to transform our economy, towards a future agenda built on corporate responsibility and sustainable development. We will then discuss with you how we can respond to the current challenges best and quick enough with solutions that are workable. And considering that we still have enough time, we would like also to take a closer look to the theme of impact leadership in the future. Now we will focus on these themes, and after each input of our speakers, we invite you to ask directly your questions and comments and allow for an interactive discussion. Now, a few words about our speakers. Mayra Castro, we are really pleased that you are with us today. Mayra Castro is born in the Brazil Amazon region. She is the founder and CEO of Invest Amazônia, and she is a true connection partnership designer. She's a TEDx speaker, Seedstars World Ambassador in Brazil, and leader in the Mulheres do Brasil group. And she's also a lawyer and holds a master's degree in international and European law by the University of Geneva here in Switzerland. And in the past, Mayra was responsible for building the Swiss government scientific consulate in Sao Paulo, which is called Swiss Next Brazil. Thank you, Mayra, for being with us today. Mayra's co-speaker is Professor Dr. John Elkington, who is founding partner and executive chairman of Volans Ventures, co-founder of SustainAbility, and former faculty member of the World Economic Forum. In the past, John was placed fourth as top CSR leader. And he received, I've seen that on LinkedIn just a few days ago, the World Sustainability Award from the MTPI Foundation. Congratulations from our team as well. And one of his most significant contributions to the field of sustainability was the introduction of the triple bottom line, a concept that has been used as the benchmark for the development of the UN Global Compact, the Global Reporting Initiative, and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. He has served on over 80 boards and advisory boards. His 20th book is called Green Swans, The Coming Boom in Regenerative Capitalism, about which we will talk today. Thank you, John, for being with us. Now, let's start. Let's start with you, Mayra. You speak on behalf of the Amazonia, and you are witnessing the social and economic fraction in your region. For example, deforestation in the Amazon rainforest skyrocketed in the last 10 years, and it caused a global indignation among ESG-conscious investors and companies. Now, when 2019, the wildfires increased significantly, there were many investors, over 250, who managed almost $18 trillion in assets, and they signed a statement to urge companies to participate in halting destruction. But a year later, we could see that only a few introduced their own policies against deforestation. Now, could you share with us, given this context, what can be learned from your region, Amazonia, in order to use economic methods to move faster towards regeneration?
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here, back to Geneva, and sharing the stage with John. And I'd like to thank each of you who is here with us today. Let me give you a little bit of perspective directly to your question about investment funds. The Amazonia has been burning for many years, more than 10 years. How does it happen? There is a specific moment in which it happened more consistently, which was back in the 70s with the military dictatorship that implemented an economic modeling that doesn't agree with what the forest has to provide. So basically that was actually what is destroying the forest currently. Just to give you the dimension, actually research have shown that about 70 to 80% of deforestation is correlated to cattle. So that means that this is not an economic power that talks and speaks with what the forest can provide to all of us. So this is something that is quite interesting. Now, going back to investment, as I said, the forest has been burning for many years, and I can tell you that from our local perspective, we have seen not that much been happening, especially from the private sector, but recently I realized that something was changing, and I went through a journey to search what happened. And basically I realized, and actually this is a very personal perspective, I think that the role that investment funds can play and has played is crucial. You know that in the 2 years ago, 230 investment funds have signed a letter against deforestation. Now, it's true that they haven't done that much as we could expect, but I can tell you that here in the field, we could feel the difference. How? Well, just to understand, the 3 biggest banks in Brazil have suddenly started playing a role in our region here. And that happened because of the investment funds. I really believe that, because it will be much harder to access external capital without looking at those questions. So yes, there was an impact from the investment funds with the pressure that they have made, and we can feel it here. So on the ground, all the sectors related to the region are moving. Some of them are quite scared, like cattle, soy plantation. Others more focused on impact investing are actually looking for more investment and etc. So at the moment, our current business environment is moving. It's quite chaotic because even the central bank is getting involved, private banks are getting involved. And I think that the international community is also more interested in doing something here. And I believe that we as individuals, we do have a role to play as well, because think with me, a country, a company, a family is all made of people. And this is the point to make a shift. We need to understand what we can turn into obsolete in our behavior, in our beliefs, in order to make something change. We cannot change results without changing who we are. And sometimes we think we can just change the processes. But let me tell you something. It happened to me once, and I think that you have heard someone who wants to lose weight. And this person goes to the gym, do a diet, and actually achieve the result. But afterwards, it comes back to the point it was before. Have you ever heard about it? So that's a very simple example that I used to basically visualize that we need to challenge who we are, what we think, what we believe in order to make, bigger changes. But now going to the macro perspective, I strongly believe that the role investment funds can play is crucial. And we are seeing the results here back in the field, in the region. And again, now currently, everything for me is quite chaotic because everyone is moving around. And this is exactly the moment that we can create new things. I think that this is the crucial moment to build new initiatives that are more towards a new economy. And my second point is, I think that economically, we need to foster what local context can provide to us. And what we have seen in my region, at least, is the other way around. Things come ready, and that's basically what is destroying the forest. And all of us, we will feel the impact. We are already feeling it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Mayra. You just have mentioned a keyword, change, and that's a nice red carpet to John's work. Thank you, John, for being with us as well today. You work with philanthropists and social entrepreneurs around the world, and many of them refer to a theory of change. Now, in our prep calls, you said you're different in that sense that you do not follow a specific theory of change. I found it quite interesting, that approach. You rather look at the unusual angles of theory and practice, and you're trying to change the world through various pathways. Remodeling economy is one element of it. In this context, could you explain to us what do you mean with the concept of green swans, and how do they address the market mechanisms that are working against measurable, positive social, economic, or environmental outcomes of business action?
Well, like Mayra, I'd just like to say thank you to you all for the invitation and the introduction. And I'm very much looking forward to the exchange, both with Mayra and with the wider group of people represented here today. I don't want to sound arrogant by saying I don't have a theory of change. Of course, I have some sort of theory of change, but I have, although we've been funded at times by people like the Skoll Foundation, I've been very careful not to say, we think you press button one and then these things all cascade out, because in my experience, that's not the way things work. Life in general, but life in markets is very often a mess. I mean, it's chaotic, just as Mayra said. And in some ways, I quite like chaos. I mean, I for various reasons, one of which, exactly as Mayra said, is that in periods of almost maximum chaos, new things new experiments are starting to happen very often on the edges of a system. And I'm really interested in some of those experiments. So you mentioned social entrepreneurs. Yes, I've worked with social entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs in different parts of the world for decades now. And I love them. I think they're extraordinary people. I think at times we expect too much of them. We put money in as philanthropists and we expect them to change the world. Well, the reason why they're doing what they're doing is very often there are no markets for what they're doing. There's no value perceived, at least financial value, in terms of what they're delivering to the world. So in terms of the theory of change that I do have, for 40 years now, I've mainly worked with business, and I've focused on individual businesses and their sectors and their markets. And when I started, companies would typically say, well, it's all very well people like you coming and asking us to do X, but the consumer is not asking us to do X. Our business customers are not asking us to do X, and the regulators are not interested either. So I've not been neutral, and the organizations that I've set up and run during that period, 4 of them, have not been neutral either. We've always said we try to be objective, but we want to be neutral in about 20 years. So we're moving towards a set of changes which our clients, our customers, corporations may not like in the short term. So in the late 1980s, for example, I did a first book on green consumerism. It was called The Green Consumer Guide. It sold 1 million copies in the space of about 18 months, went into 20 foreign editions, and shocked the life out of many of our key clients. We were working with Unilever. We were working with Procter & Gamble. We told them the book was coming. They ignored that. They just thought, well, we can't get our board to pay attention. So we'll talk to you because that makes us feel we're doing something. And then that wave hit, and all of those companies were scrambling in very short order to take lead out of this, mercury out of that, chlorine out of that, whatever. So as I say, we're not neutral. And at times we work with investors. And so again, I've worked with socially responsible investment and venture capital funds for sort of 30 some years now. And much of that work has not been wasted, but it's actually been a rounding error. I mean, it's been on the edges of the capitalist system. That's no longer true. And I think one of the things I take to be our theory of change is that it's almost like surfing. You have to set the conditions to create waves of change, but you've then got to be able to almost surf them. And in a way, my career has been one involved surfing now 5 waves since 1970. And each of them has had very different characteristics. Some of them have been largely European or OECD world, some of them have been global. I believe that we're going through one now that is increasingly global, that involves the financial world in a way that it hasn't previously been involved. And so what we see is this sort of stampede, this herd movement towards ESG, environment, social, and governance, influenced investment. Well, I think that's a useful baby step, but it's interesting that just recently, something like $2 trillion worth of assets under management, financial assets under management, was stripped of the term ESG because that's not what they are. And what happens in the herd movements is everyone gets over enthusiastic. They all want to label themselves in the new way. And we've seen it with environmental, with green, with what it's sustainable, whatever, circular. It happens every time. So we tend to play into changes that are already happening. We try and amplify those. And a final point, I think we'll look back at this year, 2021, in very much the same way that we look back at 1968, in the same way that look back at 1989, that when there are moments where the whole system starts to shift, and that's happening because the evidence of the climate emergency and behind it the biodiversity emergency is everywhere around us, and ordinary people are waking up to that. So to go back to Mayra's part of the world, the fact that Amazonia is now a net producer of greenhouse gases is terrifying. The fact that we've not yet woken up to that, I think, is equally terrifying. And the strange fact of today's reality is that businesses are waking up to that faster than our governments and our political leaders and so on, who are still buried in old battles. I'll leave it there, but I think we're almost at a magical moment where things could go very, very fast and urgently towards solutions, but equally they could go very fast and urgently towards chaos.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And if you could share a couple of words about the green swans, this metaphor.
Yes, that. Yeah, I'm sorry. So everyone will know of the work of Nassim Nicholas Taleb. I mean, when he first came out with The Black Swan back in 2007, I mean, everyone thought he was a soothsayer, somebody could see the future. And because very shortly after that, we had the financial crisis. I think what he is saying in his work, as I understand it, is there are these things that come along every so often that are an utter surprise to us all, that secondly have a scale of an impact which is completely off the scale. And by impact, I don't necessarily mean the positive impact that we focus on these days. I mean chaos again. And although I think chaos can be a good thing, it's not automatically a good thing. And then thirdly, we tend after the event to look back and think we've understood what's just happened, but really haven't properly understood why it happened. And therefore we set ourselves up for failure again. So the simple idea of the green swans is that most people who do ESG, for example, most people who are trying to deliver the sustainable development goals with the best will in the world are on incremental change paths. And if I do have a theory of change, it is that if you're trying to address exponentially changing problems with incremental solutions, you're spitting in the wind. You're really not going to significantly change the needle. If, on the other hand, you're going for exponential solutions, the chances are that you're going to have all sorts of unintended consequences that you never expected to happen. We see this every time we come up with new technologies. So green swans are not individual change agents. They're not individual companies, at least in my mind. They're market shifts. They're paradigm shifts in the way that we think about our place in the world, our value, and so on. So the book is trying to track some of those shifts, and in the process saying, and in the midst of all of that background noise, there are some really interesting new players starting to erupt onto the scene. And we call those ugly ducklings, because at the moment they look completely weird. I mean, 15 years ago, I was watching Elon Musk when I was working with Ford Motor Company on Dearborn in Detroit. And I found Elon Musk fascinating, but Detroit basically said, we tried electric vehicles 100 years ago, it didn't work then, it's not going to work now. What do we have now? 2023, 500 at least electric vehicle models on the road. So these disruptions are coming at us, not just in mobility and transportation, they're coming in every sector. And the financial world is still struggling to wake up to some of that. So that's some headlines around green swans.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. I'm leading now to Renate because she had an eye on the chat with the questions. And I'm sure there are quite some questions in regards to what you have shared, John, and also you, Mayra. Renate.
Thank you very much also to our speakers. And I would like to ask Valit to unmute and to ask your question. You have a question for John, as I understand.
Yes, and thank you very much, Mayra and John, for sharing your insights. Very, very interesting. So we at Rebound, we're building a marketplace for a living nature. And one of the things we found was having conversations with a number of firms is that they have a genuine desire to act. But and of course, there are different sizes of firms. And I found them they exist in a couple of categories. There's one who will go through the traditional routes, the recognized routes, invest in trees, invest in soil, or energy efficient systems. And there's those who are completely lost. They don't necessarily understand the vocabulary. They're not quite sure where to go. And then they saw, for example, the recent scandal by British Airways, where they were penalized in essentially by The Guardian and Greenpeace regarding their investigation. So that scares them. They say, well, if BA gets it wrong, what chance do we have of getting it right? And so we found that there is really a need for firms like ourselves and others to really handhold them and nearly educate them on the vocabulary, the options that is out there, recognizing that this is a very fast-moving space. So I just want to get your insights, John, on terms of, is this something you've seen and how do you tackle it yourself?
Thank you, Walid. And I think the answer is yes. I mean, with these waves of societal pressure, firstly on governments, then on business, now increasingly on financial markets as well, and cities, the language keeps changing, and people just try out the language. And I'm not totally against that, because I think as human beings, we learn from trying things on and trying things out. And so BA, I've worked with them in the past, but the problem is that very often the people who do the experimentation with new language are people in public affairs, communications, those sorts of media. And they don't totally always understand how the language is understood by the wider world. At the moment, and this event is a very good example, the language of impact has come up the curve very, very sharply. Now, when I started in the 1970s, we talked about impact. We did environmental impact studies, but those were almost uniformly about negative consequences of development and industrial activity. Now it's large, that stuff is largely forgotten, and we're now talking about the positive impact that we all have. And it's inevitable that people will screw up. They'll talk about elements of what they're doing and you know, expect applause. And I actually think it's healthy if some of those champions of change, self-declared champions of change, get beaten up and get beaten up in public, because you know, we do not want this language stolen from us. We do not want people to use it to the point where, I mean, I helped introduce the term sustainability back in the late 1980s. I set up a company called SustainAbility at a time when nobody understood that word, and now it's everywhere. And I challenge anyone to properly define or understand. So just final point here. One of the companies we're working with is Novartis in Basel. And one of the things we're doing there is looking at how do you put a financial valuation on impact, both negative and positive. So I think the language, the vocabulary is still evolving. And as long as businesses understand that and play into it in that sort of learning mode, then I think we'll be fine. But if they play into it in a propaganda mode, and you will have seen this many times, then technical term, but we're all screwed, because then the agenda races away from us and we lose control.
Thank you very much. And just one little thank you insight for that. One of the things that we're trying out is actually working with the innovation department of those companies. They're more used to trying out new tech, new processes. We're saying, well, here's an approach to doing it. Thank you again for your answer.
I'd love to know more about what you're doing. Yeah.
Thank you. Mayra, we have a question for you. One window of opportunities that you have mentioned is nature itself. Can you elaborate on this a bit more?
Absolutely. I think that's fascinating. Well, first of all, nature itself is by and large our biggest asset. What we eat, what we wear, what we take as tablets, it all comes from the same source somehow. Now, let me move forward to something more complex, which is tokenization. How tokenization could help to keep the forest alive in the Amazonia? Well, we do have vast lands here. Let me give you the dimensions. So if the Amazon region was a country, that would be the 6th biggest in dimensions. The whole region is actually the size of the whole European Union together, just to, you know, for you to have an idea. Between the 2 biggest capitals, Belém and Manaus, it's about 2 hours of direct flight. So just to give you a dimension of the whole size here. Basically, we do have public and private land. When it comes to private, we have farmers, for example, that are producing, but we also have private lands that are not producing economically. When it comes to public land, then it's way more complex, because many of those have no destination, and that is the intersection with deforestation. Then you have conservation unities and so on. So that is the complexity. When it comes to tokenization, we have different ways. You can go to the public and you can go to private. I strongly believe, just to complement what John has said about the speed of public and private sector, I am actually more towards working with private sector, you know, be it companies, entities, or any other sort of, you know, organizational system. Why? Because it's fast. We cannot wait the government to do something. We can't do it anymore, because I think our whole democracy is changing as well. Because we as citizens, we have to be more active and more vigilant in what's happening in the public sector. So coming back to tokenization in the private, I've been following the carbon market since a while to understand how it happens, how it could be helpful for my region. And I can tell you that it's very complex, but what happened is we have really like private land with no economic production, with 1,000, 50,000, 100,000 hectares. It's big. And basically it is there. They are not doing anything with it. So with tokenization, why not to help those private lands and properties to earn money somehow by protecting the forest? What is the problem? What is the issue? Is to connect the dots, because those people, they are there. And let me tell you something, just 5% of Brazilian population speak English. How can we be part of the game if we don't speak the basic, which is like English, you know? So it's quite complex. How are we gonna do it? And another factor, which I think is even more important than language, is culture. I strongly believe that cultural aspect has to be in the very core of any negotiation, first of all, any economic and social shifts as well. And we have to bear it in mind, at least when it comes to, you know, the Amazonian rainforest. So I strongly believe that, yes, nature is itself an asset. I just share with you the example of tokenization, how it could be helpful. I can tell you that the Brazilian government recently had done something to that, but I cannot believe that is one true, and also that can be really implemented for various reasons. But here in the field, I think we need to educate people about the possibilities to keep the forest alive and think of new economic factors that they can use for themselves. So again to carbon market, I've been approached by some property owners. They want to understand what to do. So there is a key here and an opportunity to do something. Now, again, if I have a little bit of time, I would highly recommend all of us to look at academia, to scientific institutes, because there is a lot of nature there transformed into technology and processes. And what we need here in our region, for example, is venture building. I would highly recommend to look at the venture building, to take that and transform it into products and businesses.
Thank you, Mayra. We have 2 minutes for a last answer for this first round. Patrick, would you like to ask your question for John?
Yes, thank you. So this is quite it's a very interesting topic. And my question is, on the micro level, will ESG ever split up into a kind of an impact asset class after we have proper measurement for the ESG asset class? And kind of on a macro level, are you worried about arbitraging, maybe firms arbitraging between different regional taxonomies across the world? Thanks.
Well, Patrick, that's a complex question, and I'd be a fool to try and answer it absolutely. But yes, I do think firms always arbitrage different systems. So if different regions, different markets operate different systems and rule books, of course, businesses will try and pick the weaker ones or whatever it might be. But you may equally find the reverse, that I actually genuinely do think we're going to see a seismic shift in the next 10 to 15 years. And increasingly, you see the precursors of that in certainly the businesses that we operate with, who see this as now, they used to think it was impossible that we'd go in this direction. They now see it's not only impossible, but it's becoming inevitable. And so strategically, they're trying to play into these new markets. As to impact becoming a subset of investment markets, that's sort of already happened with impact investment, which I think last time I looked was something like $700 billion of assets under management. That's still very small compared to the markets as a whole, as you know, but it's on a fairly sharp growth curve. But the problem is that if you cut that 700 billion or whatever it is at any particular point and ask people, what do you understand by impact or ESG, you're going to get very different views. Now, that's a strength in the sense you've got a broad church, lots of different people coming in and working together and so on. But it's a weakness if we do not somehow get our language sorted out, going back to an earlier point. And taxonomies, much as I hate them, are actually one stepping stone in that direction.
Thank you so much, John. And also thank you, Mayra, for your first round of commenting on the questions and the feedback from the audience. I would like us to take now a next step to the second theme, which is really about solutions, workable solutions. We kind of touched on it already. Now, John, you have worked with an A to Z of business worldwide, and now you guide the Volans team when it comes to working with multinationals to transform towards a regenerative future. And in your book, The Green Swans, you talk about systemic solutions. You just talked about the horizons of this seismic change that's just around the corner. Could you explain to us your opinion around which approach you would like to see applied in order to have the problems be addressed in a way that they become tangible, and that not only businesses are challenged on the sustainability role in the emergent future, rather than having all the different stakeholders involved and seeing them playing an important role?
Well, if I may, what I'd like to do is just start by going back to something that Mayra just said, which is that in many ways, this is cultural. We can look at technology, we can look at business models, we can look at market shifts and so on, but unless and until this becomes properly embedded in cultural dynamics and expectations and priorities, it's simply not going to happen. Now, what happens every time you have a new paradigm crashing in and older people get very frightened, very fearful. They become more conservative over time. If they have pension policies, their pensions tend to go into safe businesses and sectors that they understand. And at the moment, that might be baby boomers still investing, even though they should know better, in fossil fuels. At the same time, you've got younger people coming up at every point in the system, and they see a different world. They see this as their future. They see their parents and grandparents as largely having, damaged their future prospects. So in terms of what I think we need to do with all of our organizations, and you kindly said that I guide Volans. Well, to some degree I do, but it's a small team, but it actually guides me and it shapes my thinking as well. And I think what we've all got to do is to start listening to and working with and supporting and enabling younger people. I'm 72 now, I'm a baby boomer, so I'm not going to be young again. But I do feel that, I'll give you an example. I mean, in Spain, for example, over the last sort of 18 months, we've worked with a big infrastructure and renewable energy company, Acciona, and they're global. And we work with 27 of their fast track executives, relatively young, over last year. And what was interesting was the brief was go away and evolve, develop, design a 5-year master plan and strategy for Acciona. What happened at the end, and it was driven by the younger people, was this turned into a 10-year master plan and strategy for the group as a whole as their core business strategy. Now, that wasn't particularly what we expected. It wasn't particularly what we drove people towards. It's what happened. And I think we've got to engage younger people at every level. We can't expect them to know everything they should know at this stage. We can't expect their education to have prepared them for what they're going to have to do. We've got to support them. And just the final point there is, I said I'm a baby boomer. The one thing that worries me almost more than anything else in this space is that aging populations do become more conservative, and yet we need politics, we need business strategies which are disruptive, which have higher risks than we're typically used to taking. And therefore, I think pan-generational work across the generations is much, much more important. Every generation has to learn the impact language, but not just the language, then how to deliver and how to find the right solution. So I think that cultural piece is fundamental, really.
Thank you, John. And also that's kind of a nice reference to what we are trying to do with Geneva Impacts, our initiative, where we try to engage the different generations, but also the different actors from different sectors in order to build solutions with a long-term perspective rather than short wins. Mayra, turning now over to you. When we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, and John, you described nicely as baby steps towards sustainability, a sustainable future. These SDGs, they are a common agreed framework, and they are meant to help identify complex issues at the local and regional level. Now, we heard the UN Deputy Secretary General 2 years ago that she said traditional approaches to development are not going to bring the SDGs to life, but paradigm shifts. Now, could you elaborate for us, where do you see opportunities to implement transformative solutions that connect generations and regions?
That's another fascinating question. I would like just to say that I'm always surprised by synchronicities, because John just mentioned what would be my final message that is related to a 5-year plan. Because what happened with us as human beings, we are always looking behind. There is a survival, mechanism. And what we need is look, to the future and envisage what is new in the unknown field. So basically, all of us here, we are in certain categories of generation. So John has just mentioned a baby boom. He's a baby boomer. And then we have the X factor, that is my parents' generation. I am a millennial. And then we have the other one, which is the Z generation. And each of those generations have different behaviors and values. And there is one single factor in it that has changed a lot from one to another, which is internet. Access to internet has basically designed our behavior as generation. Let me give an example. I am a millennial. I'm from intermediate generation. Why? Because I can communicate with those before me here that didn't have access to such a technology before, but I also communicate with those that are coming afterwards, that they have been born, with internet access to, a lot of technology. So basically my generation is a bit liquid. It's not as volatile as the other one, but not as solid as my parents, generation. So I think that's important to understand what are the generations, what type of values they have. In my generation, and I know that I'm not the only one here as a millennial, I do believe that we are more purpose-driven. My parents' generation seems to me that they are seeking more security in a job, for example. They want security, a family, a house, car, etc. I really do not believe in that as a person, from a generation, because I had different opportunities and I see the world in a different way. Now, when it comes to decision, that also influences how we think and how we actually, can contribute to something. I will again go back to my case. I did a very dangerous career shift a couple of years ago because I was seeking for something else. And I'm not sure my mom actually would do so, but I did it because I was looking for something else. And what happened to me is I refused a lot of things that I was taught that was great. And it was dangerous because I put myself in such a vulnerability that was dangerous. I had to face failure, I had to face fear, and etc. But I believe that my generation is more willing to do so than previous ones. And we do not know what will happen with the others that are coming because they are extremely volatile. And I think that is great. Why? Because you have to put everyone together. That is the point. Now, what would be like a platform to put all of us together? Entrepreneurship and innovation. Why? Because that can actually take companies, investment funds, academia, NGOs, etc., all together to think together. Because what I believe we need to do now is really break the walls and make bridges. How to do it? Through collective intelligence, which is basically a mastermind. We have to put people, from different perspectives, generations, competencies, race, gender, etc. Because the more diverse, the better ideas we will have that we are not seeing. And I believe this is a way to look at the future. Because if we are just hanging out with people, similar to us, we're going to have similar results. When we are dealing with diversity in this very strong way, we can't predict what can happen. And this is for me the beauty of have, this mixed, between generations. And I'd like to share with you the case of the Seedstars World, because, it's a Swiss-made investment. I don't know how to describe it because they are so big at the moment, but they are connected to almost 100 countries, evolving the entrepreneurial ecosystem. I think that is quite interesting, and they change quite fast according to the situation they have so far. So that's an example of, what generations can bring together. And I strongly believe, as John just mentioned, that we need to foster young people and bring them to the stage in the very conceptual phase of any project, anything that we do, because if you want to know what the future will look like, we need to look at those people because they will be building it up.
Thank you, Mayra. Renate.
Thank you very much. And I already have some questions that were posted in the chat, and John already gave a short answer, but I think we don't want to stop with short answers. So Eckhart, would you like to ask your questions?
Yeah, thank you, Renate, and a great discussion so far. Just to repeat what I just posted in the chat, and I would like to get a bit of a sense of your view, or both of you, on this. You kind of mentioned all these challenges that we have to instigate change, but what would be your recommendation either for policymakers or for companies or for communities in terms of the one single most important measure that these different entities, these different collective intelligence groups, if you want, can implement to propel change and to make sure that change is going in a direction where it can no longer be reverted to the status quo ante. So what would be the one single most important recommendation that you would have to give to any of these three entities I mentioned? Thank you.
I was waiting for somebody to direct. Let me just kick off and then hand over to Mayra. I'm going to say something that is at the moment impossible, but I think over time will become not only possible, but as I said earlier on, inevitable. I think our major problem in capitalist societies is economics. And I said that I say that as somebody who studied economics for 1 year, and in 1968 gave it up because it seemed to have nothing to do with what I thought was going to be important in the world. I now regret having done so because I think there are a new generation of economists coming up, most of them women, as it happens, sort of, Marianne Mazzucato and Kate Rayworth and so on. But I think we've got to change economics. But I can't tell that to every CEO. You've got to go away and genetically engineer economists. But we've got to have that as an overriding assumption. Economics is going to have to change, and therefore it will change. But at the moment, what you've got to do as a CEO, as the head of a ministry within a government, as an investor, as a sort of city mayor or whatever, is to do something that makes sense at your level. And one way to do that is to network with other people like yourself that are trying to do the right thing. So if you're a city mayor, there's the C40 and all different networks out there. Join in them and not just in a sort of passive listening way. Think about how you can help them mobilize and lobby and influence change. That's one key thing. The second one I would say is, and this is a bit revolutionary at the time when we've all been locked down and got used to working from home and all the rest of it, get out more. And that includes people on boards and C-suites at the very top of organizations. Don't assume that you understand what the future is going to require of your organization. Go out and see some of the people who are inventing the future today and making it a reality. Because time and again, when I've seen people, senior, powerful people, exposed to those sorts of experiences, they come back transformed. So we've got to somehow get these people out of their comfort zones and out into their periods of not maximum discomfort, but areas where they're forced to learn a lot in very short order. Mayra.
Thanks, John. Mayra, what are the single most important shift?
Well, it's quite challenging because we are talking about different perspectives and people and entities. I would like to share what serves to me, and that has become a kind of a daily mantra, which is I tell myself very constantly that I have to be big, brave, and bold. And it actually relates to risk mitigation. Should it be for a company? Should it be for a person? Because we all have to make decisions all the time, right? So how to do it? This is the point. I said what, but how? Networking. We need to network more, because basically this is the way you can actually have different ideas. Maybe it's because I'm a connector. I'm always doing networking. This is the air that I breathe, like every day. But again, this is the way to create a different collective intelligence. By the way, I'm just here because of that. Eckhard, many months ago, he added me or just saw my profile, I don't remember. And then I invited him for a chat. And basically, this is what happened. And here I am. So basically, we don't know exactly what can happen, but something might happen. And there is a specific word, just to finalize, this is the word I'd like to share for everyone. I think it's like regardless of anything, which is serendipity. This is the word I would like to share with all of you. Let's thinking about serendipity.
If I may just very quickly, when we set up Volans in 2008, serendipity was one of the values I insisted went in. And that doesn't mean, for people who don't know, it doesn't mean trust to luck and wait for luck to happen. It means create the conditions in which luck can happen and almost certainly will happen. So I totally agree, Mayra.
Thank you. Valit, please ask a question for Mayra.
Thank you, Renate. And I just want to come back to the points that Mayra, you're making, and also John, which is about this paradigm shift. And for a paradigm shift to happen, you need this change in culture, right? And right now, this youth, which is incredibly demanding, from where they purchase and from their parents, and all kinds of services, is pushing a lot of that culture shift. But for culture shift to happen, it needs to be underpinned by a new technological platform. So Mayra, you mentioned the internet, the impact that has had, and earlier on in the first piece, you also mentioned tokenization. And I think that's the technological platform that will facilitate this paradigm shift, which is one based around tokenization and blockchain, because what it provides for people all around the world is the ability to have a measurable impact in a transparent, traceable, and trusted manner. That doesn't involve, a series of intermediaries, but that can be done in a trusted manner. And if they can do it in a manner where it's not just for charity, but where they can make money out of it, imagine investing in nature is profitable for you. That is what is going to facilitate that paradigm shift. So I, thank you, for your insights. And I just want, to come back to you, Mayra. Is this what you were thinking in terms, when you're talking about tokenization? Is it effectively democratizing nature for everyone to participate?
It's a bit beyond, because for me, technology is a mechanism. It's not an end itself. So for me, blockchain, for example, is just it. It is a way to something. So in the case of nature, this is one way to make the forest alive as it is, natural, profitable. This is about, again, connecting the dots and basically understand how can we make nature profitable without destroying it? Because if we do so, I'm sorry, but we are destroying ourselves. Because nature will kick us out of here easily, So how we can be part of it? And for me, technology is just a way to do so. I strongly believe that tokenization is a way. We are slowly seeing it happening here. But what is the problem? Is because some people from outside of the region, they see opportunities here, but they do not understand how things function locally. And this is crucial and paramount, because if you don't do so, honestly, you can't do anything. You can have a lot of money, you can have the best ideas, have good intentions, but yet it doesn't work. So we have to be very careful to understand if the project that is coming, to you here, this person that is actually approaching you, what is his or her life experience with the region? Again, I'm talking about, my local context here, because that is important. Going back to tokenization, basically, we don't need to buy more lands. We can help those who are already owners to make them profitable, and also be profitable for ourselves as well. again, this is a kind of a mechanism that we can use technology to make, nature more profitable for everyone in a way that is, yes, transparent, yes, clear for everyone. I would say that we need actually a lot of transparency if we want to save the forest, very honestly, because we are also part of the problem. I'm afraid to tell you, all of us actually, that we are all involved in deforestation here at a certain point. If you have eaten meat, if you eat salmon from Norway, yes, you do have any correlation. Anyway, I'm just giving you a couple of examples that we need transparency, and blockchain and that tokenization can be helpful to, to make that happen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, John, and thank you, Mayra, for your insight. And it's really funny because we kind of envisioned that we will end talking about impact leadership, and there are so many aspects you just have mentioned in your answers to the questions that we got, what it takes to be an impact leader beyond just glossy words around impacting. And John, you phrased it well. It has become a buzzword, but we don't want to stay at the rhetorics. We want to go beyond. And that's why we are hosting as Geneva Impacts, Geneva Macro Labs, these kind of conversations like tonight. Also, thank you, Walid, for your question. And we know that Rebalance Earth is doing some very interesting stuff in that realm as well. What I would like us to do now is to, before we close, I would like to ask both of you, John and Mayra, for a final statement that kind of communicates to us your key message that you want to leave us with tonight. John, would you like to go first? Sorry, you're muted.
You think we'd learn over time. Yes, of course, I'll end with a message, but it's more of an invitation in the sense of you've got some wonderful people here doing extraordinary things. I'd love to know more. I mean, Walid, I've already expressed an interest in what you're doing. Marianne, you've talked about some of the work that you're doing on impact. We'd just love to know more about what is going on in this wider world of ours, because this is a very formative moment. And Mayra earlier on talked about the need to connect. And I'm a great believer in hybrid vigor. If you can get different things to work together, you suddenly end up somewhere that you couldn't ever have imagined before you put the different components in touch. So I suppose my message is an invitation, and it's please do get in touch. And my email is john@volans.com. Thank you.
Mayra, thank you, John.
Well, yes, my final statement is also an invitation, a real one, which is think about a 5-year plan. And I think John has anticipated what I'd like to actually invite to you. Think about it. A 5-year plan that can contribute to economic shift in a region such as the Amazon region here. Now, think of all the elements that can be put in place to make that happen. Any investment, ideas, people, anyway. Now, think of how you can be part of this plan. How can you contribute to that? So if you have any idea, please find me on LinkedIn, and I would love, again, as John said, to listen to people and understand what can be basically, done, because I'm real. I want to make that happen.
Thank you. I'm very delighted that both of you made this invitation to our audience, and that's the one of the reasons why we are holding these impact talks, so that we can grow our collaborations, our networks, and reach out. Thank you for being so kind with us. To close our today's session, I would like to thank all the participants for this incredible, rich discussion. And I would like to thank you for your active participation. Would like to highlight as well that we are back on air in 2 weeks on Wednesday again. It's the 6th of October, where we will talk with Gaia Harrington from KPMG and Oliver Schelsker from the Swiss Re Institute. Gaia tested 1970s end of the world predictions, and we will talk about her findings. It was featured in The Guardian just a couple of weeks ago, and we will contrast her findings with a discussion around ecosystem valuation and carbon removal strategies. So it's kind of closely linked to what we talked today. It's a very hands-on topic. In the meantime, I welcome you to get in touch with us. Let us know if you want to learn more about our work. Discover our new video podcasts on our YouTube channel, and please leave us a comment on LinkedIn or on YouTube, and we are happy to reconnect with you. Thank you so much. Thank you, John. Thank you, Mayra. And thank you, all of you, for impacting with us. We believe that these conversations are about to jumpstart new work that we're doing in the impact space, and we don't want to stop here. Thank you so much, and have a good rest of the week.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.